Sveiki visi susirinkę į prieš paskutinį kibernetinio saugumo mėnesio seminarą. Aš esu Vaidas Virbukas, tinklų ir saugumo skyriaus, saugumo sprendimų skyriaus vadovas. Dirbu Bluebridge MSP kompanijai. Ir mūsų įmonė jau antrus metus iš eilės palaiko ES kibernetinio saugumo mėnesio iniciatyvą ir draugė su partneriais visą spalį ir dalį lapkričio kviečia verslo ir IT specialistų bendruomenę kurti organizacinę kultūrą, kurioje IT saugumas būtų užtikrintas bet kurioje organizacijoje nepriklausomai nuo jos dydžio ir sektoriaus. Na, o dabar leiskite pristatyti, ką veiksime artimiausią valandą. Tai tikriausiai daugelį besidominčiam organizacijos saugumo sprendimais teko girdėti raidžių junginį XDR. Tai ko gero yra karščiausias šių dienų madingas trumpinys, kai kalbame apie saugumo informacijos ir įvykių valdymą. Ką reiškia XDR, kuo jis skiriasi nuo SIEM, kaip jis veikia ir netgi kaip jį įdiegti. Į šios klausimus šiandien atsakys mano kolega iš Suomijos, Tapio Varamaki, distributoriaus Exclusive Networks atstovas. O SIEM ir XDR palyginimas bus atliktas remintis pasaulyje lyderiaujančio pagal Gartnerio naujausią 21 metų ataskaitą apie SIEM gamintojus Exabeam viziją. Trumpai apie patį pristatymą, tai Tapio planuoja tilpti į 55 minutės kartu su klausimais atsakymais, o klausimus atsakymus galite užduoti chat lange esančiame apačioje dešinėje pusėje. Taip, kad kviečiu aktyviai uždavinėti klausimus, nes tai puikia galimybė realių laikų paklausti jūsų dominančių temų. Klausimus, ko gero, paliksime pabaigai, nes Tapė pristatys pradžiai palyginimą dviejų sistemų ir po to ten tam tikrą viziją parodys iš Exabeam gamintojo pusės. Jeigu bus svarbių klausimų, aš pabandysiu irgi juos įterpti į laisvą erdvę. Okay, Tapio, I have made the brief introduction and now the stage is yours.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. Just want to check with you, Vaidas, you can hear me.
Yeah, we hear you very well.
Okay, that is good. Yes, so good morning from my behalf. And is it Elena or is it me switching to the presentation? So I should be sharing my screen. Okay, and there we go. So yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Tapio Varamaki, and I've been working a long time for a company called Exclusive Networks. So we are a distributor company that acts between the vendors and partners like Bluebridge to provide, in our case, cybersecurity solutions to the market. And Exabeam has been one of the products and vendors I've been looking after for many years. I've been involved in several deployments. I've been really following the vendor closely. And I'm presenting the technology today. And when we had a bit of planning that what could we present now as a part of the Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we thought that maybe this XDR might be something interesting. We had a joint presentation together with Bluebridge also in I think it was Q2 in the springtime on XDR. That was more like just touching the topic and a little bit opening what it is about. But today we are going to a bit more specifics. We again will look what the XDR is about, but we elaborate maybe a bit more deeper. We just have a quick recap what SIEM is about, because SIEM is the market where Exabeam is also kind of playing. That's the world and the space, solution space, where Exabeam is kind of playing. But then at the same time, the market is in massive change, and SIEM market has been there for a long time, and now we are seeing some fairly quick changes in the market. So then we just thought that, okay, maybe today it would be very interesting to actually understand what are the kind of exact differences of SIEM and XDR, because the outcome and the goals of both of these platforms are very similar to each other. Both of them are trying to help you with the threat detection and incident response processes. So, and it kind of consists from the similar elements when you deploy it. So let's have a quick look to the both concepts and then have a little bit like speculative and kind of a comparative approach what to the kind of actual differences of these two platforms. If you run into any questions, you can put them into the chat box, and Vaidas can interrupt me and present the questions. I'm in the full screen mode, so I cannot see the questions while talking, but Vaidas, feel free to interrupt. So, let's get started. And before we kind of start with any definitions, I think it's very important to kind of ask that why what are we trying to achieve with these solutions? And I think there are at least like 4 different domains and outcome categories, or maybe not outcome, but more like objectives that we are looking from either SIEM solution or maybe nowadays also from XDR solution. And especially with SIEMs, I think we can think of these categories so that we some of the companies might deploy centralized log management solutions for compliance purposes, maybe for centralized storage purposes, and also for reporting purposes. And then we have this broad domain of threat detection and incident response, where the idea is to have tools and data available, and also the workflows, the processes, the content, so that when we have a possible security incident, we have tools to answer for any event alert or maybe a question coming from our executive management, that what is the person involved in this event or incident, what was the asset involved, what happened before, during, after the event. Maybe we are interested if this is normal or something, some sort of anomaly deviating from our normal. Has this seen before? Why did this happen? Are there what are the accounts that are involved in this particular incident? And maybe we need to create a timeline for all the events that happened. And SIEM as a concept and SIEM tools, they were started like 20 years ago. So in early 2000s, we start to see the first centralized log management solutions coming to the market. And I think the actual term SIEM that was coined, defined in 2005. And according to Gartner, SIEMs support data capture and analysis from heterogeneous third-party sources that is other than the actual SIEM vendor, including market-leading network technologies, endpoints, servers, cloud, and business applications. And the actual term is divided into 2 parts. The SIEM part is for log management, analytics, and compliance reporting. So this is security information management. And then the security event management is for real-time monitoring and incident management for security-related events from networks, security devices, systems, and applications. And the way how SIEMs usually work is that you have one central place where you are gathering like one central database where you are collecting a lot of data from different sources. And we have different maybe collectors, agents. We are forwarding usually through syslog this information to our central SIEM system. And that the idea is that it can be our central data lake where we can run different queries and searches, maybe do some correlation and detection. And it's our kind of a single pane of glass where we can control all our security monitoring. And in the 2015, 2016, some of the vendors came to the market, including Exabeam, which has been one of the pioneers in UEBA market, which is an abbreviation for user and entity behavior analytics. So then the idea with the UEBA is that it can augment your SIEM. And the idea is that, okay, we start baselining the user behavior and we start creating baselines. And then if we see deviations from these baselines, either what we have seen in this company or if they are against the rule sets defined on the bottom of the solution and the policies we have defined over there, then we might raise an alert. And now this has been the latest trend in the past years in the SIEM space, so that on top of this log management and the data we are having, we can also run the UEBA queries. And like I said earlier, SIEM solutions have been available for a long time, but there has been not too much development and progress in that space. But when first of these UEBA players came to the market, we actually start to see a bit of change in the SIEM space. And now with this cloud evolution, a lot of applications going to the cloud, a lot of companies going to the cloud, the ways and the rules how we collect data and how we analyze things in security space, that has started to change. And that has forced these SIEM solutions to react a little bit to way how we see this whole security monitoring solution space. And now XDR has become one of the initiatives how we could approach this similar space. So then if we look at the XDR, how would we define it? Because it's something that where we don't really have a standard definition available. In the next coming slides, we are going to go through a couple of the concept slides and concept definitions, how certain analytic companies and how certain institutions are trying to define XDR. But the market, I think the term that came to the market like maybe 2019 or 2018, and for different vendors, it means different things, and there is like no single definition. So some of these EDR vendors, they claim that, okay, XDR is like a next version or like an augmented version of EDR. So we add some other data sources and we correlate that with our endpoint and with our endpoint telemetry data. And based on that, we can provide better and like more analysis, more insight, and we can provide more findings, we can create the solution more accurate. But because those vendors, they are coming from the EDR space, what they are saying is that, endpoint is still very key. It's very centric in this whole thing. Some of the other vendors might be more like the vendors coming from, for example, from SIEM space. They are saying that yes, an essential part of XDR is some sort of large data lake where we can pull all the data from different sources, and then the actual analyses are happening on that data lake in this particular platform. And then that kind of sends us to a direction of SIEMs. Okay, isn't that the very same thing what we have been trying to achieve with SIEMs for past 20 years? We collect all the data in one single place. We run the analysis, we run the correlations on that platform, and we get some insights, we get some outcome. And that's exactly the key thing. And because of that, I think these two acronyms are colliding a lot. So that kind of creates some sort of security analytics platform. And then one of the questions might be that, okay, if this kind of becoming one and the same, how does it actually differentiate from, for example, from SOC Visibility Triad? Those of you who are not familiar with SOC Visibility Triad, we are going to cover that on one slide later in the presentation. But yeah, it's very much the same thing. And then we have also sort of definition that, okay, we are having like a set of integrated solutions and security tools which are integrated together, and together they can provide better visibility, better control, better detection capabilities than standalone separate individual tools. And those vendors who are large cybersecurity vendors having this Cisco style approach that, okay, we have this end-to-end platform, you can purchase every single security tool from us. Those vendors are coming with this approach. Yeah, you can purchase everything from us and you are going to be safe. That's going to be the viable approach. And because of all these kind of different definitions and different flavors of XDR, this brings us to a little bit like to an ice cream kiosk where we have a lot of different flavors available, and all of them are maybe tasting good. And then the question is that which one do you choose? How do we consume it? And now in the next slides, let's try to define it together a little bit, that how this could make sense, and especially how do we differentiate this from the SIEMs that are our other acronym and which are falling a little bit into the same solution space. So we take first the XDR definition coming from Gartner. And Gartner is enjoying enormous respect throughout the market. And because of that, we really need to check and see what Gartner believes about and how they think about XDR. And according to Gartner, they are saying that it's XDR is a SaaS-based, vendor-specific security threat detection and incident response tool that natively integrates multiple security products into cohesive security operation system that unifies all licensed components. And this is one of the definitions, and it's a very cloud specific because it says that this must be on SaaS. And as we know, Gartner is an American analyst company, analyst house. So cloud transformation, cloud migration, it's more US driven and it's more enabled in the US if we compare to the European market, where we have maybe a bit more regulation, local regulation, which might not be fully compatible with these American cloud platform providers. And because of that, I think they are very SaaS driven over there. But then we can have a look to another vendor where we see that or sorry, not vendor, but an analyst house. And that is Forrester, who is defining that the evolution of EDR, which optimizes threat detection, investigation, response, and hunting in real time. And like we saw on one of the previous slides, we saw on this particular slide, let's take a laser pointer over here. You can see my mouse. So over here, we defined that it's kind of evolution, next version of EDR. And that's like one of these flavors that are trying to define XDR. And it says that XDR unifies security relevant endpoint detections with telemetry from security and business tools such as network analysis and visibility, email security, identity and access management, cloud security, and more. It's a cloud-native platform. They are also emphasizing cloud over here, but built on big data infrastructure, which could be your SIEM, to provide security teams with flexibility, scalability, and opportunities for automation. And now if we think about this definition and the definition from Gartner, both of these approaches take us to a model where we have these different sensors, where we are collecting this telemetry either from network, from cloud, endpoint, maybe about our identities and privileges. And all that telemetry data is collected into one single platform, which is the data lake. And that can be our SIEM. And then for that data, we are running analyses. We can do different correlations. And we based on our findings, based on our analysis, what we see, what we find, we can then take the desired actions, response actions, do any required threat detection or incident response workflows we want to run. And if I compare these three pillars of XDR to way how SIEMs work, I think we see a lot of similarities over here. So to the SIEMs, you are collecting data either from your applications or from your security tools. And usually from both of them, you're sending it to your backend system, which is the SIEM. And then for that data, you might enrich it coming from through some different sources, like let's say threat intel from third parties, maybe some watch lists which we have defined, maybe some additional context we are bringing from user directories or other sources. And then the idea is that we make those findings, we make those analyses, we make those correlations with a combination of this thing. And I think the outcomes we are driving for either of the solutions, they are a bit similar, or they have a lot of common. And then the question is that, okay, if we had already SIEMs, if SIEMs are working in a fairly similar way, maybe there are some certain differences and maybe this is more cloud compatible and all that. Then the question is that, okay, why do we need this XDR? Why don't we use SIEM and EDR? And I think one of the key reasons is coming from this point over here. The legacy SIEMs, they are great systems if you can kind of configure, if you can adjust, if you can maintain them in the proper way. But the reality is that most of the organizations are truly struggling to maintain, for example, the correlation rules on the SIEM systems. data sources, the amount of data the users are sending, the applications that they are using, the workstations, the applications, everything is changing. It's in the constant change. IT is going forward and evolving light speed. So then if I have some static rules which are defined based on certain metrics which are valid as of today, it might be very well the case that those same metrics are no longer valid 1 year later. And because of that, maintaining and really kind of making your SIEM work in the way as it should, that might be, that might be a big challenge. And a lot of companies are burning a lot of money on trying to make this work in the proper way. You definitely get your data to SIEM platform. You can visualize that data. You can run maybe different reports based on that data. But the more insight, the more analysis you want to the more value you want to get out of that data, the more challenging it becomes based on the assumption that we are working with the typical static correlation rules that are the way how you define SIEM rules and how you try to make those insights from the data it's ingesting. And the other challenge is, of course, the fact that we have a lot of these security tools in place. We have a lot of security sensors deployed, but most of them are still running in the silos. And for the bigger companies, I think I saw a survey result that on average, like large American companies are using 19 separate individual tools to run these or to when they need to work with security incidents. And 19, that's a massive number. If I need to log in and use and try to get the data from different sources, from 19 different individual sources, that's going to be a heavy task to me. I need to spend a lot of time on just learning these tools. And maybe there comes a new version half a year later, and then new features which I need to learn again. And then, it's becoming very difficult to try to if I need to put together data from different tools, it's getting complicated at some point. And if we are not able to unify the data, if we are not able to consolidate the data, and if we are not able to analyze the data with SIEMs, then we need something else. And one of the drivers for XDR is also that most of the SOCs and most of the security teams are really not having, or they might have certain workflows, but there might not be standardized ways of working. And then depending on your skill set, on the analyst skill set, the outcome and the way how I approach certain problems, that might depend heavily on my experience and the skills I have. So all these challenges when we look all these challenges and think about the threat detection, investigation, response concept and the whole domain, there's plenty of challenge, and we need to solve that somehow if we want to keep our organization still up and running, safe and protected against cybersecurity threats. And that's really where XDR is coming with these big promises, and where XDR tries to bring a new, fresh approach and maybe partially even replace part of that solution space where some of where many SIEM players have been playing for past 15, 20 years. And there are a couple of different ways of defining this XDR a bit more detailed. And according to Forrester, there are two different models. So one is hybrid, where you mix and choose the most relevant solutions that are suitable for your organization. And then the other option is the native approach, where more or less all the tools are coming from the same vendor. That's the end-to-end security approach from one single vendor. And the key difference is that with this open hybrid model, you probably can choose the more suitable tools that are fitting exactly to your organization needs. And then with this native approach, the idea that, okay, everything is readily integrated, and it's probably, at least based on the promises, it's very easy to deploy. Everything is readily integrated together, and you just start using the solution. But then, of course, the downside over here is that then you are fully dependent on that single vendor, and cybersecurity is also a very large solution space. There's more than 3,000 vendors in this industry. So then the key question is that, okay, show me the vendor who can do every single solution area well. And then, of course, if you are in this, go for this path, then you just have to adapt to those tools that particular vendor is offering to you. And then if we think how XDR works in action, this is more or less the way. We collect the data, we send it to our backend where we are trying to detect the threats. If we find any, we investigate the incident and the threat. We make the analysis, the conclusions that we find based on that. And this is, by the way, then we take these response actions to that particular threat. And all this is supplied and fed with this content that might mean the methodology, the way how we are doing investigations, the analysis, the response. Also maybe trying to define and automate some of the workflows, which is kind of pointing to the SOAR, security orchestration and automated response part. We also might have a lot of these different threat intel feeds, which we use to enrich the data we have collected. And it also can be, for example, information about our users and something relevant for that. And using these three different pillars, we are trying to provide significant improvements to this the threat detection and incident response domain. So then if someone is asking that, okay, but how does this differentiate from SOC Visibility Triad that was coined many years back? And the idea of SOC Visibility Triad, its original name was SOC Nuclear Triad, and which was the nuclear triad that was a key Cold War concept, where the idea was that you had three different type of nuclear missiles. You had your aeroplanes, your bombers, your nuclear bombers for dropping the bombs from the air. Then you had your submarine missiles, and then you also had these land-based intercontinental ballistic missiles. And the idea was during the Cold War that, okay, even if 2 out of our 3 missile platforms fail, we still have one more available. And when SOC Visibility Triad was defined by Anthony Chuvakin, I think in 2015 or 16, his idea was that, okay, by combining EDR, NDR, and then putting that data together into SIEM and UEBA platforms, we can actually correlate this data, and we always will see the events, and we get the relevant telemetry data. And even if one of our platforms fail, the data is still available somewhere. And then if we can get this data to the centralized place, then these tools also will be used when for taking the response action. And I think the biggest element that is missing from this triad now in 2021 is the cloud element, and maybe also the identity and access management element. Because the more we are using SaaS applications, the more we are using cloud applications, cloud platforms, the less we have, or the more we need some sense or some data coming from those platforms. And I think XDR is now kind of bringing this missing element into this triad. So I guess it becomes a quad after that. And if we look at the portfolio of Blueprints and the way how they work, today we are talking about Exabeam. And Exabeam is the SIEM or UEBA or maybe now an XDR platform. And then that's the SIEM element from this one. Then Blueprints is also working with ExtraHop. That's the NDR element. So we get the network telemetry either from on-prem, cloud, or both of them. And then Blueprints is also working with Sentinel-1, which is the endpoint and detection and response tool, which brings us again telemetry and response capabilities to our endpoint servers and workloads, which can be on-prem or on cloud. So then this same triad, which we have on high level here, this is when how it would look in action when we put some real vendor names on top of that. And all these three different vendors over here, they are also founding members of XDR Alliance, which is driving standardization, integration, and cooperation of these different vendors belonging to this alliance. So that kind of helps with all the integrations, with all the co-play that we are looking from this integration. And as time is essence, we run some concluding comparisons, and let's start from the domain coverage. What kind of items are we looking to cover with these two different solutions? And now the approach for XDR, we choose the open XDR, which is more this mix and choose. We choose the most suitable tools for different solution areas from different vendors, or it can be the same vendors if the solutions are relevant for us. But anyways, it's the mix and choose option. We are not going for this native option now in this comparison, because that would mean that we have just one single vendor solution available. So Open XDR, that's really trying to help the organizations to solve and cover the domain of threat detection and incident response. And with the automated approaches and with the whole kind of, next generation approach, all the machine learning, all the maybe bit more intuitive user interfaces, user experience, it can make a great difference over here. SIEMs can, or they have always tried to help organizations with this particular domain, but the problem is that SIEMs have also been performing fairly badly in this space. SIEMs have been much better in compliance purposes, in centralized storage purposes, the long-term storage, and also the reporting purposes. But if we look at the modern TDR workflow, I think SIEMs are missing a part of that. Many of the SIEM vendors have either deployed or they have acquired some of the SOAR players where they have tried to bring some automation over there, but especially for the analysis and the investigation part, they are still bringing very little help, especially the legacy SIEM players. The design approach is that with the XDR, everything starts from this TDR. So we try to help you with when you need to work with these incidents and your response process, and everything, more or less, everything is based or starting from that assumption. And SIEM SIEMs are coming from these different angles, and they maybe start more like, and their background is more like in those years and those times when we started from the assumption that if something happens, then we have this data, then we can do the analysis, and maybe we create a couple of correlation rules for automatically detecting that if something happens. But the problem is that now with the modern cybersecurity, we probably should start more from the assumption that when something happens, we have the tools and workflows and responses available. Data can be stored wherever we have implemented our SIEM. It can be on-prem, it can be cloud, it can be a hybrid approach. And with XDR, we don't necessarily need to store the data for a long time. We want to analyze it, but we possibly don't need it anymore. So then it can be in our data lake somewhere else, but it does not necessarily need to be on our XDR platform. And like we already discussed, there are various ways to implement it, and XDRs are more, or they are more cloud driven, no matter which of the analytic companies you are looking at. And the SIEM, because of these compliance purposes, they need to have an option that we can store data almost infinitely. But then with the XDR, it's not necessarily the case, and some of the platforms might not provide the long-term storage option at all. And the detection with SIEMs, that's more or less correlation-based analytics. And then with the XDR, we are seeing more like this machine learning and kind of adaptive detection capabilities, which might really help you in the current modern distributed world. And with SIEMs, yeah, everything is possible. You can build whatever automation, you can build whatever workflows you want to, but the challenge is that there might be very little available out of the box. And then with XDR, because the domain coverage, it's a bit more limited, it's a bit more specific. There's more out of the box content available, there's more out of the box methodology available, and there is more automated analytics available. And that probably helps you with this TDR approach. And then the question is that, okay, how do I implement it? So with SIEM, if you don't have it, you can build it, or if there is one existing, we can replace that with a new SIEM, but it's usually fairly heavy projects. And then with XDR, it works usually in a way that we already have the data somewhere, either in our legacy SIEMs or in some other tools, or maybe we point that data to our XDR platform from our security sensors and tools. And this makes the implementation much quicker because we don't have to tear down the whole centralized logging design we have, but we can just probably augment this or implement this by augmenting our existing data platforms, data lakes we have. And Exabeam has two offerings. There's XDR, which helps you to augment your existing data lakes. And then if you don't have your data lakes, your centralized log storage available, then there is also a full-blown SIEM solution available, but it's still very like XDR and modern approach that it provides. So Vaidas, I think our time is up. You promised me 45 minutes. It's 46 minutes consumed now, so...
Thank you.
Any questions, thoughts, something would you like to, dive into some more items or parts over here?
Okay, thank you, Tapio, for your quite detailed introduction of XDR and the definition findings. Looks good. We still have no questions, and I'm asking participants to feel free to ask Tapio. It's a good chance. I can ask from myself, talking about the organization size. What advice would you give to small organizations, let's say up to 100 users? Which tool to choose for event analysis and data protection?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And of course, if we go back to one of these slides over here where we saw all the elements that we could have here. If you are a 100 people organization, you probably don't have A, budget, B, skill set, and C, time and resources to deploy this entire stack and have like very detailed solutions. So then we probably need to optimize and make a bit of balance over here. And I would definitely go for some sort of EDR solution, because it's still the endpoints that are being compromised. And if ransomware or something else hits your endpoint, it's more or less game over. At the same time, we don't have it here, or we do. So identity, that might be something. So if we deploy like multi-factor authentication, some of our key services, then it's more difficult to do any phishing or anything that compromises our credentials. And I think by having the EDR, the identity protection, two-factor authentication, that's a good start. And then if I can start deploying additional tools here that are relevant to me, and if I can start running that data, if I can start putting that into some analytics platform, it's all helps. But you start building this from the kind of based on the outcomes, based on the kind of objectives we have. We try to start from the basics, and the more attack surface we have, I would start from the solutions that will which reduce the attack surface significantly. And once I have part or the basic elements in place, then we can start running analysis and kind of additional investigations on top of that data. And if you're a small organization, we don't want to have a complicated system. So then we want to have some kind of system that provides us a very easy automated way, doesn't require hours per day of maintenance or tens of hours per month to maintain the correlation rules. You go for some automated and easy to maintain type of solution. Try to avoid customization or anything that burns plenty of time and skill set. Because if you're that 100 people organization, you probably don't have time and too many resources. So basic protection elements and then easy to maintain type of solution. And that would be my advice.
Okay. We have a couple of questions from the audience.
Yeah.
The first one is from Vitalius. Can you recommend open source SIEM or XDR?
Yeah, I think in open source space, I think, for example, Elastic is open source and kind of free of charge, which is also very popular. A lot of commercial SIEM vendors are building their data indexing and the data collection platform based on Elastic. So that might be one of the choices for you. But then, of course, when you get it for free of charge, it's always a trade-off for something. So what you get from commercial vendors like from Exabeam is kind of they put a lot of things together on your behalf, and well, you have to pay for it, but then you save plenty of time. But you could try Elastic, for example, with that one. What comes to XDR, that's a bit more complicated. So then we definitely would go for this option, because for native XDR, we don't really have open source or free options available. But then you could start from this option on the left side. So let's have this next slide. So if we say that our data collection platform was Elastic, then we would need to get this telemetry data from some tool. But then does that provide you also the detection and response capabilities? I'm not sure of that. But the event data you can get even with Windows event collectors and other tools. So the telemetry data you can collect, I think the same applies to the network part. But at some point, of course, you have somewhere the kind of break-even point that in trade-off for having things for free of charge, you always need to maintain, you always need to integrate, you always need to spend time on that. And then if you have the commercial approach, the vendor is doing that on your behalf. So it's a careful balancing that which route I might want to go. But but there are definitely some options available. And there's even some of these free of charge threat intel feeds available, which you can use to enrich it. And you definitely can build some sort of XDR platform. But I think the challenge will be that most of the machine learning, most of the kind of analytics and detection capabilities, those are something that usually the vendors maintain on your behalf. So you might run a bit short with your like self-made approach. But I still think that you definitely can do it.
Okay. And I would add that the main difference between SIEM and XDR is machine learning on XDR side. So I'm not sure does someone from open source providers do that, but it's a good thing if you want like to spend some time on the description of the rules, etc.
Yeah, I think there are algorithms available, but at that point you actually need to start kind of understanding how machine learning works. You need to start testing those algorithms. Maybe there is some community work available, but still, like then you are really starting to spend a lot of time on that stuff, and it might get a little bit complicated at some point. And on top of that, you also need to understand a lot of like what's happening in security in order to maintain and keep your algorithms relevant. So I think it might be a tough play, but still possible.
Okay. So the second question, Darius is asking, can XDR be used for vulnerability detection in microservices?
So Darius can elaborate his question a bit more based on what we are answering here. But if your point is that we are running container-based microservices as a modern application, yes, it's like it would be one of these security tools, one of your security control points over here, which could either be your vulnerability management platform, which could detect those vulnerabilities, and then those vulnerabilities would be fed to our XDR platform, and that could be like, okay, we receive an alert that there's a critical vulnerability over here which requires patching, and then of course the main thing would of course be preventing bad things happening for that particular microservice if there is that vulnerability. So we try to protect that microservice. But yes, we are not limiting it here. We are not leaving anyone out here, no matter if that's your on-prem applications you are running, or if it's your cloud native applications that are running. Cloud native means something that is born in cloud. And then if we talk about that born in cloud, it's usually something that is based on these microservices and based on containers. Not necessarily that, or it's not the only definition, but it is just the tools and ways how you develop your applications on cloud. So this is definitely applied over there. And I think one of the big drivers for XDR is this whole cloud migration, because SIEMs, they were found and established during the days and times when more or less all our functions were still on-prem based. And then a little bit depending on the way how you collect the data, usually it's syslog, usually it's with some type of collector. Then the things, on cloud, they work a little bit differently, and the data collection works a little bit differently. Syslog is no longer the best way of collecting that data. So then what we need to do is having other mechanisms, and then XDR might provide a bit more cloud native approach and better integrations for those tools or those platforms to collect and see that data. And the answer is definitely that it can help you protecting your cloud services. And I think for it's no matter if we look at some of these native XDR vendors, many of them have some tools for cloud protecting cloud platforms, and usually this container microservice protection is one element over there. But the same applies over here. It can be it's going to be now a little bit like acronym play coming, but there's cloud workload protection platforms, CWPP, which can help you with that protection, and we definitely can integrate that as a part of this bigger XDR circle. There are cloud native application protection platforms, CNAP platforms. We also have cloud security posture management platforms, which also might help with us with that one. But this whole cloud security space is also in very quick evolution. So something that is relevant today might be looking slightly different 2 years later.
Okay, our time is up.